No one knew who slid the gold-edged envelopes beneath every door on Faraday Street. Their seals bore a treble clef pressed into wax the color of dried blood, and inside lay a single sentence written in an elegant, archaic hand. The Opera of Reflections will be performed for one night only. Admittance granted by curiosity alone. The address, printed underneath, belonged to the majestic Lyric House, shuttered since the 1931 balcony collapse that killed 37 patrons and ruined the city's taste for grand music. Ever since, ivy had knitted across its colonnades like laced fingers, and rain had drilled fissures in its marble skull. Even vandals avoided it. Legends said you could still hear the final soprano's last note, suspended like a spider's thread in the rafters. Yet something in the simplicity of that invitation tugged at a part of me I had forgotten. Perhaps the same hunger that made moths embrace flame. At 7:30, on a wind-worried October evening, I joined a thin trickle of others converging on the boulevard's blackened heart. A single lamp burned above the entrance, revealing more guests than I'd expected. A retired math teacher I'd once failed to greet in the market, the barber who hummed waltzes while trimming my hair, a young couple whose arguments I heard through my apartment wall. All of us clutched our envelopes like passports. No one spoke. It felt as though words might tear the gauze that separated reality from whatever breathed behind that door. The usher appeared without warning, a man of prodigious height, dressed in a charred tailcoat. One sleeve hung empty, as though fire had devoured the arm that once filled it. He gestured, and the heavy doors sighed open. Inside, the lobby smelled of wet stone and wilted roses, yet every chandelier blazed with fresh crystal. Velvet drapes, once faded to rust, now glowed imperial crimson. Somewhere deeper, strings tuned themselves. A sigh of catgut, a cough of resin. The hush around us thickened, until I could feel other people's heartbeats pulsing in the air. I found my seat, row G, seat 13, center aisle, though I had never requested it. The orchestra pit lay hidden beneath a gauzy veil of fog that crept over the lip of the stage and curled around our ankles like exploratory fingers. There were no programs, no musicians visible, no set, only a row of objects stood at stage front. 7 full-length mirrors housed in Baroque frames, their surfaces shrouded by black cloth. The house lights dimmed. Somewhere a muffled sob escaped. Perhaps it was mine. With a sound like distant surf, every mirror cloth fluttered to the boards. 7 silver planes blazed, but they reflected nothing of the stage or balconies. No seats, no faces. Instead, each captured an underwater gloom, the impression of trenches where light could not follow. I leaned forward, searching for my own image. The glass remained stubbornly foreign. Then the conductor strode from the wings. If conductor he was. He had no baton. His right hand terminated at the wrist, the flesh polished smooth like river stone. The stump glimmered with embedded shards of mirror that caught stray beams and scattered them in starbursts across the auditorium. With his left hand, he made a single downward cut through the air. The chord exploded, violin shrieking an impossible high E that set my maulers singing. No players sat in the pit, but the music throbbed as palpably as blood against skin. The chord resolved into a progression that felt familiar yet hopelessly wrong, as if childhood lullabies had been stitched together backward. Lights swooped across the audience, not to illuminate us, but to search. Each white cone froze upon a distinct patron. One by one, the chosen rose as if strings had jerked them upright and descended the aisles toward the stage. My light found me last. It felt warm and heavy, like a hand cupping the back of my skull. I resisted, but my knees unhinged of their own accord, carrying me past murmuring rows too afraid to meet my eyes. When I reached the footlights, I joined 6 others spaced before the mirrors. We faced the audience, while the conductor turned his glittering stump toward us. The music softened into a lull, a hush within the hush, and I became aware of something stirring behind the mirror directly opposite me. An ember of motion, the way you sense a cat slipping through grass before you see it. On a cue, only the mirrors heard. Silver surfaces bled into clarity, and the things inside showed us ourselves. Or rather, showed the audience versions of us that had been twisted like damp linen. In my mirror stood a figure I recognized with nauseating certainty. My own body, but taller, elongated by a neck that seemed borrowed from a crane. The face was a smear, eyes pulled outward until they touched the hairline, mouth cracked in a permagrin too wide for flesh. Worst was the hands. Dozens of fingers that sprouted like root systems, each ending in a small, sucking mouth. A scream skittered across the mezzanine. Another patron's reflection had sprouted translucent wings, humming with veins thick as shoelaces. A third mirror revealed a woman, fused to a swarm of moths, her skin shedding powdery scales whenever she moved. The audience gasped, recoiled, but remained seated, as if their bodies understood imprisonment more intimately than their minds. The mirrors rotated on hidden casters, presenting our warped doppelgangers from every angle. I tried to step back. My feet belonged to someone else now. Through it all, the orchestra wove melody and dissonance, threading them together until they were indistinguishable. I realized the music was describing us, each hideous chord an anatomical diagram of fear. Then the conductor's stump flashed. The melody halted mid-breath. Silence thicker than music draped over us. Mirrors ceased spinning. For an eternal instant our monster selves met our eyes, truly met them, as if glass separated only the living and the not yet. The conductor bowed. We, the chosen seven, felt a tug. Gentle at first, like the tide licking your ankles. The mirror version of me stretched one rude hand outward. Glass dissolved to mercury. The hand pierced through, and with terrible delicacy it brushed my cheek. I felt its texture, warm, damp, softly pulsing like a heart's inner chamber. Where it touched, sensation bloomed, the taste of iron, the scent of earthworms after rain, the memory of every time I had stood in front of a mirror and hated what I saw. The moment broke when a man in row C vaulted the barrier and crashed onto the stage. He was heavy-set, sweating, stammering, "No, no, no," as the words were talismans. He seized one mirror, perhaps hoping to smash it. His fists met the glass and kept going. The surface swallowed his arms clean to the shoulders. He shrieked. Reflections convulsed like oil on water, then stilled. When the mirror released him, his arms ended in flayed stumps, ribboning blood on ash-colored boards. The wound shimmered, not bleeding so much as leaking reflected light that evaporated into steam. He collapsed, and the stagehands who should have rushed to aid did not exist. Instead, the conductor raised his mutilated limb again, and we seven turned away in unison, compelled by a choreography older than bone. The mirrors followed us on their casters. The one containing my monster slid behind me, until its surface pressed against my spine. The cold soaked through cloth, then skin, then marrow. I felt my heart knocking against that planar chill, as if trying to exit my chest. Around us, the audience began to change. Not physically, not yet, but acoustically. Breathing unified into a low chant, wordless, scoured of individuality. A theater of strangers exhaled as one, and each exhalation seemed to drag at something I couldn't name. I remembered the rumors. The Majestic's collapse in 31 had been blamed on foundation rot, but old newspapers whispered that the cause was mass hysteria, that the audience stampeded not outward but inward, toward the stage, as if fleeing from themselves. 37 crushed, 37 mirrors, rumored present that night. Now I understood. The opera house had never required singers or scenic artists. It needed only reflection. The second movement began without warning, a violent pizzicato. Every string was plucked so hard I expected tendons to snap. Light strobed. With each pulse, my monstrous reflection gained substance. First a transparent outline, then organ glow, then shuddering mass. Simultaneously, I felt myself thinning, vapor drifting from pores. Across the apron, the woman fused with moths in the mirror, peeled forward. Moths erupted from glass and clung to her human counterpart, dissolving her clothes, eyelids, perhaps even thoughts. She did not scream, her mouth filled with wings. I understood what would follow. The monstrous selves would cross over entirely, taking up residence in skin vacated by our retreating spirits. We would occupy the mirrors instead, prisoners inside silver tombs until the next reopening. I searched for escape. Footlights? Too bright. Backstage? Obstructed by mirrors now forming a semicircle. Above, the catwalks bristled with ropes like nooses. And yet, mirrors showed possibilities. If the orchestra could fabricate new accordance between image and flesh, perhaps discord could break it. I remembered the math teacher, Master Wren, his fondness for paradoxes. During a lesson he once wrote on the blackboard, "A reflection moves opposite to its source. Reverse your direction and you follow it nowhere." I caught his eye in the audience. He was pale, hands white-knuckled on armrests, but awareness flickered there. With a tilt of my head, I begged him. Whether he grasped the plan or only his own desperation, he acted. Rising, he shouted the opening line of a nonsense limerick, voice cracking. The sound clashed with the orchestra's rhythm. Next, he stamped his foot thrice, adding a rhythmic thunder. The conductor hesitated. An infinitesimal pause, but enough. Other audience members seized upon that pause. The barber whistled a dirge off-key. Someone laughed. A raw, broken caw. Small disruptions, but each one dimpled the opera's surface like hail on black water. I exploited the hesitation. Focusing every scrap of will, I stepped sideways. Instead of obeying the choreography that pulled forward, I moved against it. Pain lanced my joints, but I continued, pivoting to face my mirror flush. We locked gazes. The monster smiled, dozens of finger mouths smacking anticipation. I inhaled the deepest breath of my life. On the exhale, I sang. The note emerged shaky, nothing like trained musicianship, but the intent was mine alone. I aimed at a frequency that felt honest, a confession of fear, and a refusal to let fear sculpt me. The sound collided with the orchestra's current, producing beats of interference, patches of quiet that swallowed the melody like sudden caverns. The mirror's surface rippled. My reflection's grin faltered, eye slits narrowing. Emboldened, I shifted to a higher pitch, bridging into vowels that a choir director once told me suited mezzos. Open, resonant, defiant. The discord blossomed. Strings screeched as if bow hair sliced flesh. The conductor slashed his stump frantically, mirror shards blinking more signals of rage. Others joined me. The young couple belted a love song from the radio, grossly out of tune but heartfelt. The barber trilled scales. Mr. Wren recited prime numbers, cadenced like a sermon. Our noises, tangled, birthed chaos. Glass screamed. One mirror cracked, not mine, but the one nearest the moth woman. A spiderweb fracture spread, light leaking through every line. The monstrous reflection clawed at its edges, but the glass caved inward, imploding rather than shattering. A gust of freezing wind roared out, smelling of deep ocean. Where the mirror had stood, nothing remained. Its human counterpart slumped to the stage floor, alive. Eyes stunned, but her own again. Moths lay dead around her like burnt paper. We surged louder. My throat burned, but I thought of every time I had chosen silence and drove the note past pain. The crane neck monster convulsed, shrinking as though starved of visibility. Fingers lost mouths, lips sealing into scars. The conductor's silhouette flickered, his tailcoat blackened anew, smoke trailing from seams. His stump dripped molten silver. He turned to flee into the wings. but the stage curtain burst into light, pure illumination, not flame, revealing additional mirrors stacked like coffins waiting upright. Perhaps scores, perhaps hundreds. Their surfaces had begun to stir, awakened prematurely by our cacophony. I understood then. This opera wanted to expand. Tonight's 7 were a prelude. The true performance would be to fill every mirror with a living soul, every soul with its own consuming reflection, until the world itself became auditorium and cast. Not tonight, I thought. With the last shred of voice, I pitched my note into a whistle above natural hearing. Ears around me popped. Eyes watered. The panes shimmied, edges fizzing into prisms. One after the next, they collapsed like exhausted lungs, exhaling torrents of cold air that hurled the conductor across the stage. He struck the proscenium and shattered into jointed fragments that dissolved mid-arc, glittering away like spent fireworks. The orchestra stopped. Silence returned, not the smothering cloth from earlier, but a breathless hush, raw with possibility. Only 4 of the original mirrors still stood, mine among them. My reflection stared, a reduced, pathetic echo, but surviving. I felt its tendril hope, a plea for continuance. My own hope, in different dress. I touched the glass. It was merely glass now, cool and empty. The reflection was my conventional self, fatigued, frightened, yet undeniably human. I spread my fingers. It matched. No monstrous flourish. Behind me, other survivors were helping each other down the stairs. Some sobbed, some laughed hysterically. The curtain, stripped of its extra world, hung limp and dusty again. Footfalls echoed above, the rest of the audience clambering for exits. No valet had reappeared to open grand doors. But they found their own marrow, pushing until wood groaned and night poured in. I lingered, investigating the mirror's frame. Small hinges suggested it could fold shut like a book or a mouth. Inscribed along the edge, hidden until the silver retreated, was a sentence in that same archaic hand. Reflection is creation. Creation is hunger. I thought about leaving the mirror intact as a warning, but superstition overruled. Gripping the frame, I toppled it forward. The glass burst into ordinary shards that glittered across dusty planks. No spectral wind, no howl, just ruin. Mr. Wren joined me. "Will it stay dead?" he asked, voice trembling. "Better question," I said, surveying the shattered stage. "Will we?" He helped me collect pieces, tossing them into the orchestra pit where fog still curled. Each fragment caught me, tiny, warped. In one I saw my eye darken to black velvet before a wink of lamplight restored brown. Another shard displayed teeth too sharp. When I blinked they were square again. The monster hadn't surrendered completely. It waited in the ordinary, the everyday glances. We did our best anyway. By the time we'd smashed the remaining mirrors and swept glass into heaps, dawn's violet seeped through broken skylights. Birds alighted on the crumbling rafters, testing the acoustics with tentative chirps. The Majestic looked less like a palace now and more like the skeleton everyone remembered. Outside, survivors assembled in the street, dazed but alive. Some clutched shards they'd pocketed, souvenirs or sins. Others pressed palms against throats, as though checking their voices still belonged to them. Sirens approached, police, ambulances, summoned by who knows what. I pictured trying to explain. We fought our reflections with mathematics and off-key songs. Mirrors ate a man's arms. Believe us, I doubted they would. But perhaps the proof lay inside that gutted hall, where broken glass drank sunrise and kept its secrets. As we dispersed, back to groceries, haircuts, arguments, through thin walls, I felt a tremor behind my sternum, like stage curtains rustling. That crane-neck silhouette, truncated but not erased, preened in the periphery of every reflective surface. Store windows, puddles, a spoon bending tea. Maybe destruction wasn't victory, but an intermission. Still, intermissions matter. They're where you decide whether to stay for Act 2. The envelope rests on my mantel, wax seal cracked yet still glossy. I consider burning it nightly, then abstain. Some part of me knows the majestic will awaken again. Hunger, after all, is cyclic. When the next invitation arrives written in a hand that calls to curiosity alone, I hope I remember this. A reflection moves opposite its source. Reverse your direction and you follow it nowhere, or you follow it deliberately into the dark, armed with your own discordant song.